experiences. This is a panel that provokes us and challenges us, invites us to think about open government in a broader way, to involve the executive power, but also the judiciary and the legislative power and the subnational governments. And it is an interesting but challenging invitation here. And in order to make sure that this difficult but interesting challenge can be possibly addressed, we have three speakers that are going to share their legislative experiences in the case of France, the judiciary with the Judiciary Council in Argentina, and the subnational governments based on the initiative of the government of Salta in Argentina. I don't want to take much of the time of the speakers, so I will start with Paula Forteza. Paula Forteza is a representative of the French Parliament, and she came to tell us about the parliamentary experience in citizen participation and open government. Thank you. First of all, let me explain to you why is it so important for parliaments to be part of the open government agenda. I think that there are three big reasons. The first one is that out of the 3,000 commitments that have been put forward by the 75 governments that are part of the OGP, 15% of them require a legislative action. So that means that parliamentarians have to be aware and cognizant of these issues in order to do their work and to push forward laws that support these initiatives. Secondly, as it was said in different panels in this meeting, we need to provide some stability to the open government policy, especially when we face a change of administration. So we need broader structures with more stakeholders that can ensure long-term sustainability. And the third reason, from my point of view, is that parliaments have to be open, participatory, and transparent institutions themselves. We need to reform them so that they can achieve this condition. And I'm talking from the point of view of a context where democracy may be at risk in some countries. So Parliament is the most adequate institution to channel citizens' participation and to restore the trust of citizens in democratic institutions and in politicians. So let me tell you what we do in the French Parliament in order to turn it into an open parliament. We work on three mainstays: transparency, participation of citizens, and collaboration with the technological ecosystem. First, transparency. This has more to do with personal initiatives that I'm trying to promote and share with my colleagues. I have all my personal agenda online in open data in order to be as transparent as possible with all the meetings that I may have with specific partners, with civil society representatives. This allows citizens to trace these relations and see if there is an impact that has to do with these encounters in my work in Congress. I also post all my budgets and my expenses online in open data. This started from a growing demand from the civil society, and there are other MPs who are already doing this. And this is not only for transparency purposes, it also has a teaching goal. There is a lot of concern in the mass media about what members of parliament do, why they are not in their seats. There is a lot of anti-parliamentarism. When we work in Parliament, we need to discuss different agendas at the same time. We need to work in Parliament, in the floor, but we also need to work in our territory with our ministers, with civil society. So the fact that citizens can see this displayed clearly on an agenda online imbues this with more transparency. Thirdly, we are focusing on citizens' participation. The President of the Assembly has put together a group that focuses on digital democracy, and we have members of parliament of all the different political parties that gather there to reflect on how we can use and take advantage of these new technologies and these new digital tools in order to favor and promote citizens' participation. So, the first few experiences of online participation had to do with consultations organized before the text of a certain bill reaches the floor in Parliament. So the civil society has criticized this approach because they are saying that we are leaving citizens in a sort of sandbox that is separated from the floor in a separate platform. So we are telling the children to play in the sandbox while the adults make political decisions in another place. So the people responsible at the political level will decide whether they choose or not the inputs of citizens. And it is not clear what is the impact or the contribution of citizens' input into this decision. So citizens um, have to participate throughout the entire process. There should be different entry points in which citizens should be able to interact with representatives and with political officials at different points during the process. So if parliamentarians are discussing a certain bill on the floor and then they pass this law, citizens should be able to have a say there. So we are working with different technical tools that allow us to introduce amendments, citizens' amendments, or to introduce questions from citizens. So this is what we are doing to ensure that we have the participation of citizens in our work. Of course, we always consider that there is a problem with the digital technologies alone. So we always have an in-person interaction in addition to the digital interaction. And then, in terms of technology, we believe that the parliament has to turn into a parliament of a platform. So, as an institution, the parliament should make available to civil society resources, data, APIs, IT codes, so that technology partners and civil society partners can build apps and services that will enhance and leverage the strength of the institution and can contribute to its modernization. So we are moving here from systematically opposed civil society to a civil society that collaborates with Parliament, and this has helped do away with a lot of fears around Parliament. So through all these pillars, through all these mainstays, we are moving now from a mere consultation with citizens to a true co-creation of public policies and co-creation of laws with citizens. So we are having a truly collaborative process, and this is a very productive process. These are some introductory remarks, so I won't take any more time. Thank you, Paula. for sticking to the time allotted and for sharing with us the experience of the French Parliament. Now I'll give the floor to Governor Juan Manuel Urtubey for him to use his 7 minutes for his remarks. We are told that he has to leave because he has another commitment, but he has the floor now. Good morning to you all. It is true that I have to leave, and I will stay as long as I can. If you see me running away, it's because I really need to leave. So thank you for the invitation. It is very good to meet, to think together how we understand that institutionality has to adapt to a 21st century mindset of our citizens that is quite different from the mindset that prevailed when the system was established. All of us are the children of the French constitutionalism after 1789 and all the trends that follow in Latin America. The modern world organized around the logic of deductive thinking or reasoning. So we move from the general to the particular. That is how states were organized. So this logic had to do with a classical deductive reasoning model. In the last 30 years, the world migrated towards a different reasoning logic for many reasons that I cannot describe in just 7 minutes here. But with this new logic of reasoning, we ended up in a different way of establishing relations. The way in which we relate to one another does not match the deductive reasoning logic. So we cannot go from a general description to the specific concepts. Today, our way of organizing socially has to do with different conceptual notions and also sometimes the individual concepts. So there was a big crisis in the political system that when we look at the classical definition of the role of the state, we can talk about the subjective power of the state or the objective power of the state. So who gets to the state and what does the state do? In both places, we see there is a strong friction regarding or vis-a-vis the demands of citizens today. So how can we open up the government? How can we open up the state so that when there is the classical participation through a vote, and this will not just be an adherence contract through which you adhere or not to something that is pre-established for you. Now we are discussing the initiative of having just one single voting ballot, where you can have a tailor-made vote according to the preferences of the voter. But the thing here is that based on this logic, democracy went into a crisis. Today we have an endless participatory democracy. But the problem lies in the fact that sometimes we try to organize civic participation from our own institutions according to our beliefs and our preferences. And we need to understand that the logic of an observer or an audience citizen is no longer valid. Citizens are no longer waiting for us to give them the information. So how can we carry out public policies? First, we need to turn on the lights. There is no justification today in the 21st century for not having full public disclosure of all the actions carried out by the government. And when I'm talking about all the actions, I'm talking about all of them, except for a few issues related to intelligence and security, where it is obvious that we need to keep some of that information confidential. And I'm sure that later on we will have a speaker talking about that. there may be some restrictions, but they should be kept to a minimum. So within that context, we have two paths. First, we need to turn on the light so that the participation mechanism is based on the full knowledge of citizens. In our province, we are working on a bill on open government from an open logic standpoint. So we shouldn't pre-format the law and then present it to the society to see what its views are. Of course, we need to get the society involved in the development of that law. Of course, it is more difficult. But today, for each of the sectors of the community, we have a true defense of what has been done together with society without the involvement of any third party through this kind of initiative. These laws that turn the lights inside the government, that turn the lights on inside the government and lead to participatory mechanisms so as not just to give an opinion after the fact, but before the fact, before the decision is made. Sometimes decision-making takes longer, but it requires the consensus from the social component. So today, we have mechanisms that go beyond any type of decision-making or override decision-making. So, if we look at the leaders of the subnational governments in Argentina in comparison to others in our region or in other countries, we realize that we still have a significant deficiency. We have a social media communications platform that would enable us to have an ongoing participation of citizens in all our processes. So we need to take advantage of that. So how can we migrate from a state structure built around a logic of reasoning that is no longer valid with a number of rules that establish certain parameters for work and for response that today have nothing to do with the demand of citizens? That is the big challenge that we need to address. How can we make sure that government is open and friendly and that there is no need for obscurantism? This is the way states were established originally, so we need to change that prevailing logic.
Gracias, gobernador. Perdón por...
Thank you, Governor, and I apologize for the beeping. It wasn't planned. To close this first set of presentations, we will give the floor to Adriana Donato, who is the chair of the National Judiciary Council of Argentina. Thank you, Sebastián. Let me first thank the academic committee for this opportunity to be in this prestigious panel. It is a reason of pride for me to read OGP Argentina behind me and being on stage. The fact that this meeting is held in Argentina should be a reason for pride, because it is an indication, a sign of a policy the national state has for open government. It is a sign of a policy of transparency that should be present throughout all state powers. As you know, I am the chair of the National Judiciary Council. And for foreign visitors, let me make a very short explanation of what this Judiciary Council is and how it was born. It was created in 1994 with the new constitution, and it was designed as a stop for the presidential, for the executive power, who until that time was the power that elected the judges, with the later approval of Congress. At that time, the constitutional actors decided that a new body was to be set up for the appointment of federal judges. And after the selection of the judges, the executive, based on that list, had the obligation to pick from the selected people. And that involves a process of selection that results in the election of judges who are better prepared. And this is the main role of the Council, as well as the imposition of sanctions, and in case of failure to perform with their duties, the impeachment of the national officers, as well as the administration of the resources of the judiciary and the creation of regulations for operation, the rules of operation. I am very proud that our Council is included in the third plan of action of this open government partnership with concrete goals. We have set up the Open Council unit with the citizen participation. We have established two concrete goals for open government partnership, which are very much related to our own functions. Presently in operation, this idea was the screening process of the judges should be open to community. This doesn't mean that the information was not available before, but it was so inextricable, the process to finding that information, that it was too difficult. Now there is a concrete proposal of designing a judicial map to identify the vacancies across the country and what are the open competitions to fill in those vacancies, vacant posts. Now the Council has this unavoidable duty of filling in all these vacant positions, and though we've made significant efforts since the change of administration and with the change in the Council composition, we've been able to submit 125 three-people lists, because there is it's an arduous process, because this selection involves a written exam, a public interview, and then a public hearing. These are all means to get the best of judges. And now the proposal is that all citizens should be able to see how this process works, so that they can somehow control it, they can challenge it at specific points in time. If they are not able to know when they are able or qualified to challenge it, they will not do it. So the goal is to speed up and to facilitate the search mechanisms based on an agreement with the modernization area. As Governor Urtubey said, we have to change the paradigm, but we need the technical means for that. And it happens that this decision that many presume is related to obscurantism, I fully agree that sometimes it's just inaction. There is no decision to do something. It may be that a website is forgotten over time, and nobody thinks that it has to be updated or changed. You know that technology, everything related to technology is very expensive. So this decision we've made to accompany and to invest in technology resources is fundamental for us to meet these open government goals. Let me say that I view as very important that the society has a control role, because when states are autocratic, the society has no involvement in such decisions. So citizen participation in any representative democracy is fundamental and shows the road. And I hope that all these new rules will show the road forever, that there will be no step backwards in public management transparency, because all those of us who hold significant responsibilities are then bound to walk along the path of transparency and honesty, which are basic pillars. And I will say indefatigably that we may choose excellent technical people with lots of expertise in certain areas or fields, but if they are not good people, they will be able to take a detour from any legislation. So I celebrate this involvement we've had in this law of public action, as well as our participation in the audits from the Judiciary Council. We are asked by society to account for the judges' actioning. And the Council has recommended undertaking audits in the legal cases for corruption to check on the outcomes, and the results of the audits will soon be published. They will be disclosed through open and friendlier systems, because, as I said at the beginning, there is a lot of information on our website, but it is very difficult to find it. A word used here was obscurantism, but now, with all these new rules, I hope that although this will be a very small ray of sunlight, it will provide a clear future. Thank you.
Muchísimas gracias, Adriana.
Thank you, Adriana. I will start with some questions, first to the governor, in case he has to leave. Two questions in one. And the first, that will always be asked to Paula. In the open state law, how do we involve all sectors, more specifically the most disadvantaged ones? Because there is this risk that citizen participation will become a privilege for an elite. So how do we do for the poor, for the Aboriginal and indigenous peoples, the most disadvantaged groups, to have a voice? Have you thought about that? And the second question is, how do you see, beyond SALTA, this subnational agenda? How do you see the other provincial governments in this agenda? Is there any chance for this agenda to be shared by the other provinces? Let me start backwards. I think we are lagging very much behind. I think there is a long way to go. And I say we because that's also the case for SALTA. As I said, we must have a structural change made, how the state stands before society. I think there is, first of all, an attitudinal change here, a challenge. And for that, when discussing the rules, and this is in relation to your first question, Argentina, because of its diversity, and because of the vulnerability of some of its sectors, Argentina appeals to mechanisms of positive discrimination. The ideal thing would be not to do that, absolutely, but using logics of so-called mandatory consultations of certain vulnerable groups that is what we do for greater communication. It is not a problem to open up the doors to greater communication, but to incentivize the culture of participation in regions of Argentina where as it happens throughout the Americas, our cultural fingerprint is not, the inclusion is not embedded in our culture, and this requires positive discrimination. So the logic of the law has to understand this process. And I fundamentally believe that the way to do that is through disruption, because the graduality of the process, any cultural change will take decades, and the methods, the models of participation that are somehow requested by society are not at all related to our classical representation, and that is that calls for an acceleration of the process, and that is a challenge. Thank you, Governor. The same question to Paula, plus another one. What resistance have you faced within the parliament, regardless of the individual progress made by each parliamentarian? Well, answering the first question, this is a very prevalent concern in reducing what we call the digital fracture, so that there is no splitting between those that want to make beneficial use of technologies and those who do not know and have no access to technologies. So we have two sides. First, infrastructure. There must be internet throughout the country, and that is an action from the state through investment. The second is education or training. All citizens should have access to training in new technologies and new capabilities. And our President Macron committed to invest 15 million euros on mass education. And also, this is part of the productive reform. All these initiatives are so important to us that we want to give them a constitutional status. We'd like to enshrine in Constitution the right of access to the Internet and the training or education on Internet use. So in addition to the education, there is an issue related to practicing. There are public sector practitioners and professionals that go out and reach out to people who are not able to do online procedures or participation, and they accompany them on a daily basis throughout each of the steps. And there, the Parliament has a role to play. For instance, we've launched several consultations, or we've made several surveys. Each parliamentarian representing one territory can go back to his or her territory and organize workshops or events. So it's a network that works very well when we want to find those people that may be left outside the new participation mechanisms. On your second question, our French Parliament has been extensively renewed. With the new president, he pushed the entry of new stakeholders in the public arena. There were candidates, now deputies, who come from civil society, young people, a lot of women, people who were not politicians by profession in the past, but are like a debutant, and they are eager to renovate and change and modernize things. So we have not faced any, so to say, active resistance to our agenda. However, what we're still lacking is to see people investing time and resources for projects to actually move forward. So we should do this effort of convincing and mobilizing the deputies on a one-to-one relationship for them to see, to invest time. but we are on track. And we have created a laboratory within the Assembly to expose the deputies to these new technologies, and we've had a very good reply, a very good response, so we are very optimistic. Thank you, Paula. Two questions for Adriana. The first, this, as the governor said, the culture of participation from the citizen, and certainly there is a new accountability method within the judiciary, which is a power less used to do that. So the question is, what resistance have you faced from judges to this accountability and openness culture? And the second question, sustainability. To what extent the policies you're implementing and the initiatives you're introducing in a body that typically changes its composition can be sustained over time? Let me start by the second question, which is easier for me to answer. As I said in my opening presentation, I think we have to develop rules precisely for this to be sustained over time. I hope, I desire that there is no way back here. And that requires creating the mechanisms and strengthening them so that there is a new composition of the Council in November next year. When the composition will change, the road shouldn't be different, which is the road that society wants us to follow. I have to be candid here. I don't think we've faced much resistance. However, we must change the paradigm, the model, and we're working on that. And we're working in terms of the selection and screening of the judges and on their disciplinary actions with a very good message. Those that are working appropriately with the qualifications to be judges, since I chaired the Committee of Disciplinary Actions, we disregarded all those reports that have no founded causes, that are just to provide to hinder the course of action. There were 3 years, which is the maximum deadline, which is a very long term. Now there is a proposal from the chair, because that is the proposal by Deputy Tonelli, who is the chair of the commission, and they are disregarded just with the bill from the chair. Of course, it must be voted. It doesn't mean that the chair has the power, but there is an opinion. It is voted within the commission and afterwards in the plenary. And the big channel is the investment in technology and the modernization of processes, because the truth is that we've received an obsolete infrastructure, and the challenge we have is to update all this. We have to go forward in the way of digital judiciary, the digital proceedings. There are file cases that cannot even be found, and this is something that we have to change in the judge mindset. They believe that paper is safer than digital, and this is a mistake, because paper can be stolen and carried away. But with the IT security protocols, that is difficult. Certainly we can have hacking, but if the security is there, it is impossible to see a case file disappear. As I said again, we have a great challenge to meet, and as the deputy here said, investment and accompaniment by the executive and by Congress are absolutely essential. Thank you.
Thank you. I'm going to go into another round of questions. Please be brief with your answers so that we can take questions from the floor. The first, once again, goes to the governor. So tell us a little bit more about the bill that you are discussing. what is the status of that discussion and what are the main points that could be of benefit in that bill in case it is passed. And how can this trigger a future agenda? Okay, I apologize beforehand because I will run away as soon as I finish my remarks, although I had this commitment planned for a long time. With the logic that we have in our government, now we have a meeting of governors, and I have to leave this meeting. In May, on May the 24th, on the eve of our national holiday celebrations, we decided to put together a new town hall and to have an open town hall. And we wanted to get to April the 10th with a bill that had contributions from all the civil society organizations from Salta. We also created citizen participation spaces in Salta without the representation of civil society and NGOs. And what we have seen is extraordinary. If we look at what people are saying, the first chapter, the first section has to do with turning on the lights. That is to have access to much more information. And the second element has to do with the need to explore citizen participation pathways before decisions are made using different platforms from the ones that we can contribute today in the government. So, of course, this forces us to undergo a certain transformation. Following the open government and open state logic, you need to make sure that in real time, a citizen at 4 a.m. can ask a question, and you should have somebody who can reply to that. Our system is not ready for that. We need to start getting ready for that. Thank you, Governor. I apologize for this. I know that these are not good manners at all. So let me ask this question to Paula. Looking at this from the point of view of French citizens and not French parliamentarians, what is it that you think that French citizens are criticizing the parliament for and questioning parliament for? Well, we launched this consultation a few months ago about digital democracy. We organized participatory workshops throughout the territory. And right now we are trying to summarize all the results. But overall, what we can say is that we need to consolidate and defend representative democracy, or should we move towards a more participatory democracy, and in some cases, citizens ask for a direct democracy. So these are the areas and all the concepts under discussion. When we started drilling down into these issues, we realized that citizens are telling us that they don't feel like replacing representatives in Congress because they are qualified for their role, they have been elected, and they have the expertise. So it is not a matter of replacing them with a virtual participation, but on a daily basis, the work should be more easily understandable for ordinary citizens, and they want someone who can listen to them when they have something to say, and they want their positions to be taken into account. And of course, this requires organization. You need to organize this in the daily work of parliamentarians because they have a busy agenda. Usually, they do a highly technical job. Citizens, when they are not well informed, they don't understand all the technicalities of the work they do. So it is a matter of finding the mechanisms to make sure that at every point in the process of passing a bill, but citizens can participate. And citizens and parliamentarians should work on this with the same tools. So the tools used by parliamentarians should be also accessible to the media and to citizens so that co-creation can take place there, so that parliamentarians do not have to look for certain contributions in a separate platform, because they will never end up doing that, or that could depend on an arbitrary decision. Thank you. My last question for Adriana. In terms of access to information, with the new law, with the distribution of roles and competences in the court, how are you organizing this in the office? What discussions are you having with the court, with the Supreme Court? How are you organizing all this work? Well, I can only speak on behalf of the Judiciary Council, but we have created an office, or actually we are discussing the creation of this office. Tomorrow we are going to have that discussion, and we hope that we can approve that. There were some delays because there were some challenges about how we are going to select the person at the top authority of that office. But I hope that tomorrow we can approve that. Thank you. We have 15 minutes approximately for a round of questions from the audience. So I'll take 2 or 3 first, and we will give the chance to reply to the panelists. If you don't have questions, I can keep on asking questions. There is a question there.
Sunlight Foundation, thank you for working to open up your governments and societies. We're facing a government that is moving backwards from being more open, as you know. And the response we hear is often, well, what are the limits of openness? And so I'd pose that to you. You've detailed what you're doing in the context of your countries, but as we think about the dynamics of power and disclosure and how information can be weaponized against the powerless, the increasing exfiltration of hacked data from personal accounts, what are the limits of openness, and how do you talk about them to your publics as you advocate for them?
No, but I would always go for more español. Okay, perdón. Okay.
I would always try to look for a maximum level of openness, because I think that this is the new way of having a countervailing power vis-à-vis governments, and that would be the new way of establishing some regulation and have rules that may adapt to a context of increasing uncertainty and constant change. Laws do not follow the same pace as technology. Laws are always lagging behind. State regulation is always lagging behind, and the methodologies used by governments are always lagging behind vis-à-vis the development of new technologies. The only way of keeping up with that development is by being completely open and ensure that civil society can have a role and intervene in exercising this counterpower and set the limits. If the laws, if the rules, if the methodologies of governments cannot set the limits on time, because technology is always moving forward faster, technology should be open, and civil society should be the one that set the limits on time in these complex times. So I think I will always favor more openness.
Open government and open state are two concepts that are very discussed, and We don't have a specific definition yet, so I would ask you, all the panelists, and Sebastian too, which value or principle of open state or open government you think that in your institution or in your action plan is the most important to work or to improve?
Okay. The values of open government are well known to us all: transparency, participation, collaboration. But what I found in my work that can be more as a trigger is collaboration with the technology ecosystem, because it is there where we can have state-of-the-art innovation. It is there where collaboration can bear more fruit. It is there where we I'm thinking of the terms in French, and it is there where we can challenge institutions. And there is a whole ecosystem of developers, designers everywhere in the world that is eager to hack, so to speak, institutions in a positive manner, and that can put forward these decentralized, collaborative methodologies that are the ones that I believe that all institutions should adopt. In my opinion, I think that the big challenge has to do with changing the way in which public decision makers make decisions. This is much more than making a policy transparent or opening up data. It has to do with creating a revolution, hacking the way that institutions make decisions, the way they perceive the role of citizens in their own offices. I believe that that is the main challenge, at least in the Argentine case, the one that I know the most about. That is the main challenge for Argentine public institutions. Even when data is being opened up, even when policies are being made transparent, even when there is laws on access to information, we haven't yet broken down with this close logic through which many people make decisions. I think that it goes beyond citizen participation. It has to do with a different democratic model where the citizens can have a say, where their opinions are taken on an equal footing with respect. Whenever they raise their voices, they should have a reply from the public officials. Sebastian, let me ask you a question, because you are talking about the way in which decisions are made. How could decisions be made, decisions that we make on a daily basis, if we need to consult with citizens all the time? On a daily basis, on a day-to-day basis, it is impossible to have consultations at all times. I agree that we need to have this consultation for big decisions. Justice 2020 aims at that precisely. They are listening to all sectors of the civil society, and I'm part of that program, and I think that it is truly valuable. But that is why we're talking about a representative democracy and not a direct democracy. Those of us who are in a certain position have to make decisions anyway. So how can you achieve consensus among 40 or 50 million inhabitants? That would be my question. Okay, so I take this question and I will try to address it later. I think that the challenge does not lie in the fact that we have prior consultation procedures for every single decision that is made. It would be a big step forward to have that consultation a process for each big decision that is made. But the challenge is how to have these listening spaces where citizens can raise their voices and can present their arguments and get a reply. And when they are not considered, they should be given the reasons why nobody's taken into account their input. So I think that it is important to create a decision-making model where citizens feel that they have the space to make themselves heard and their arguments are listened to and they get a reply. Once again, let me say that since 2015, those demands within the sphere of the Judiciary Council and in the corruption audits, those demands had been listened to and they had been taken into account. And with Justice 2020 at the ministerial level, I think that citizens are being listened now much more than ever before. So my question is specifically addressed to Paula. I understand that France is departing from the electronic voting systems. What is your opinion? What is your recommendation for Governor Urtubey, who was lucky enough to leave early, but he is fully in favor of online voting? You are talking about online voting, right? Well, I'm talking about electronic votes, that is a voting system on an electronic platform. Well, in France, this type of voting system had been implemented for French people abroad, the people that I represent, but there was a problem with security, so it was withdrawn for the last elections. But the president promised to restore this system for French citizens living abroad, because in those cases, the French citizens abroad only can cast a vote at the embassies, and sometimes they are far away from the embassy, so they need to travel to cast their vote. So in that case, it would be entirely justified to use that system. But I think that technology is not yet fine-tuned because we still have some anonymity issues that are not solved. We still have some security unsolved issues. So I think that we need to test the solutions in communities where there is not too much political weight. So at a smaller scale, perhaps we can have a test and make sure that these solutions are adequate. It is a matter of working in an iterative, swift manner to keep on constantly improving these technical solutions.
Buenas tardes, mi nombre es Silvia Montero.
I'm Silvia Montero. I play for Argentina. I used to play for Argentina. I'm the goalkeeper in the hockey national team. I am fighting for the lawfulness of our sports. You talk about Justice 2020. There has been fraud, however, in the Argentine Federation, and I discovered this fraud when I asked for the bylaws. I have been the chair of this group for a year. You say Justice 2020, and we have been for 22 years talking to various bodies in the Argentine government. Do I have to wait until 2020? I don't know if it's just me or all Argentine provinces. The same happens in other American countries, Uruguay, Chile, Brazil, Colombia, Ecuador. We are trying to join efforts. We sports people are united, but we have to play outside the state, and we are not recognized by the federations that are corrupt. I'm going to travel to Iowa to take this matter. I was really damaged as a player. I wonder, again, do I have to wait until 2020? Because this is a report I've made to the authorities, and the authorities have made no reply, because the case started at the Ministry of Sports in February 2017. Sorry, if you can please round up. I don't know what I can do. Do I have to wait until Justice 2020, until 2020? Well, first of all, my recommendation is to hire a lawyer to give you advice. However, I do not quite understand how you've made the report to the authorities, to the audit institutions, because if there is a case like this, a case of fraud, this is a report you have to submit to the justice. I think this is a very specific case, and we are addressing this problem from a more structural viewpoint. Your question, however, is relevant, but we cannot give any further answer on that. If you want to stay later and take it offline. Is there any other question?
Merci et bonsoir à tout le monde. Je viens de...
The speaker is speaking in French, which is not a language for which we are providing translation services.
C'était la démocratie directe. Et quand on parle de population, ce n'est pas la population générale, c'était les citoyens, car il y avait une distinction, une discrimination entre les citoyens et les autres. Maintenant, avec l'écosystème numérique, on est en train d'établir une sorte de démocratie numérique qui est presque une démocratie directe. Est-ce que nous ne courons pas vers cette discrimination? Parce que est-ce que cette révolution numérique atteint l'extrême limite des provinces? Est-ce que ça atteint ceux qui ne sont pas formés suffisamment pour pouvoir utiliser cet outil? Est-ce que nous ne courons pas vers cette discrimination? Qu'est-ce que vous proposez pour que quand même on évite d'en arriver là? Merci.
Sí. Me preguntó, digamos,
You asked me, in this new digital democracy, if we are not moving towards a more direct democracy, as it was the case of the old Greece in ancient times, and whether this could not create problems for people without access to the internet. So this is very much related to your first question, and the answer is yes. It is a very serious concern of ours that with this emphasis on creating online participation, aren't we creating more inequalities in terms of participation channels? Our big concern is that there are certain actors, such as the lobbyists or the more professionalized associations, that know very well how to use these new tools, how to use the social media, that may have more followers than others, so they know where to post for greater impact, that can conduct quantitative research studies for greater impact actions. And this creates new inequalities with the ordinary citizens who barely participate or make a post or a contribution in an isolated manner, that do not have all these savoir-faire, all these methodology around them. So when we make emphasis on the digital democracy, we're always very careful that we have mechanisms or means of accompaniment, of access and awareness and education so that the soft citizen, as we call them, the regular citizen, are on an equal footing with the more professional associations or lobbies who know how to have a greater online impact. And this is related, as I said before, with education, internet infrastructure available, and local and customized personal accompaniment. Well, we are out of time for questions, so let me thank you both for being here. It's been very interesting and inspiring. Our agenda is quite challenging, and I hope we will infect with this interest others so that they believe that an open state is possible. And I join the request of my colleagues of civil society that in Argentina, an ombudsperson should not be appointed for the people without the people. So thank you for being here.